Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to Winner W. I'm your host today, Rob, the movie guy, and I thank you very much for joining me here today because today I'm reviewing the new Conjuring film in The Conjuring, The Devil Made Me Do It. And this is the new film that's coming out on HBO Max and in theaters on June 4th. And James Wan, who had directed the first two Conjuring films, is not back directing this movie. Instead, he hands over the directing duties over to Michael Chavez, who had recently directed the film The Curse of La Llorona, which is also part of the Conjuring universe. And I was skeptical at first because the idea that James Wan is not back directing this movie, I was not so keen on the idea because I loved what he had done with the first two films, because there's a certain flair that those movies had that reminded me a lot of an action film that I thought James Wan had handled so brilliantly with those two movies, and I thought that would be lost in this film. But when I had heard that he was very supportive of this director, Michael Chavez, taking over the new film, I decided to go and check out The Curse of La Llorona. So I bought it, and to my surprise, I did enjoy the film. I didn't love it, but there was a lot that I did like about the film that I walked away pretty content with. And a lot of it has to do with the atmosphere that he's established with that film that I thought he did really good with. And I could see him bringing it over with this new movie, and he definitely does with the new Conjuring film. And like the other two Conjuring films, this movie is based on a case that was handled by Ed and Lorraine Warren, the famous demonologists that have handled many different cases like this, allegedly. And one of the most famous cases that they've handled, allegedly, is the Amityville horror case. Basically, this film follows a story of David Glatzo, a young boy that lived out in Connecticut who had been possessed by a demon. And the night that they were performing an exorcism in which both Ed and Lorraine Warren were present in, the demon had left the young boy's body and then went into the body of another man who was present that night by the name of Arn Cheyenne Johnson. And several months after that exorcism, Arn had gotten into an argument with his landlord, and things had gotten so escalated that he had killed him. And the reason why this case was made so famous was because the argument was that, well, Arn was actually possessed by a demon, therefore the devil made him do it, hence the title of this film. And the judge at that time had said, you really can't prove that because you're saying some sort of unforeseen entity of some sort made him do it. You got to provide proof, and, you really can't do that. And the Warrens and the attorney were like, yes, we can. We've got plenty of proof to show you. And one particular argument that they made, which was a rather interesting one, although a little far-fetched in my opinion, but the argument was, well, if you think about it, Your Honor, you put your hand on the Bible and you're asked, will you tell the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God? And you either say yes or no. And when you say yes, you're basically admitting that you are going to tell the truth no matter what in front of God and everyone else in this courtroom. And therefore, a God exists, and if good exists, so does evil. So, of course, our argument is rather valid. So, the reason why I'm bringing this up here is because I personally don't believe in this sort of stuff at all. I don't believe in ghosts, demons, and things of that nature. I don't believe in any of that new supernatural stuff. I used to a long time ago, but I don't anymore. And I was very well aware of the Warrens well before the Conjuring films. I knew who they were. I've actually read up on a lot of the stories of these claims that they've made. And even at that time, I was still very skeptical about what they were claiming because there's a lot of conflicting stories about what they said had happened and then what people have shown up and followed through with after the fact, saying, well, it wasn't really like that. They're saying it's like that, but it really was never the case at all. In fact, this happened. So there's a lot of conflicting stories about the claims that were being made by the Warrens, and they've obviously been made very famous for these stories and in the cases that they've handled. And I've had a lot of problems with that personally about how their story is now being brought up in a worldwide stage in cinema. And I was always conflicted with that. But when I saw the Conjuring films and solely watch it based on the merits of the film, they're enjoyable, and this film is no different. So from here on out, when I talk about the movie, it's solely just based on the merits of the film, not my beliefs towards whatever feelings I have with the Warrens. It's really just on the merits of the film alone. So from here on out, I'm going to get into my positives, and then I'll get into my negatives. The first positive for me has to do with the fact that this movie was a lot better than I anticipated, because as I mentioned earlier that I was very skeptical about someone else taking over directing duties after James Wan. With him having done such a great job with the first two films, for me, he set the bar really high, and I really didn't think anyone else could really live up to those expectations. But having seen what Michael Chavez had done with this movie, I was very impressed. And to be honest with you, having seen what he had done with The Curse of La Llorona, even though I felt like that movie was just okay, even though I still enjoyed it for what it was, but it was still just an okay film for me. But I did love what he had done with that movie, creating that creepy atmosphere, definitely making it his own and bringing those same sensibilities over to this movie. And he's still carrying on that same momentum that James Wan had brought over with the first two Conjuring films. Definitely make this movie his own, adding his own flavor to it. And without really revealing too much about this film, I will say that when it comes to some of the scary scenes, especially that opening sequence with dealing with the possessed young boy David, it really does start off with a big bang, in my opinion. It was a very exciting opening too, if you were asked for an honest opinion. And with what he was able to accomplish with this movie, creating a narrative that I thought was a bit different this time around, and focusing more on the relationship of the Warrens, how they're dealing with their health and their own personal struggles, dealing with the level of stress that comes with this job, and seeing how they're dealing with that and learning a little bit about their past, I thought was handled beautifully. And speaking of the Warrens, both Patrick Wilson and Vera Farmiga, they're both good in this movie, and I had no doubt in my mind that they would be. But what I appreciate, as I mentioned earlier, that I like that we got to spend a little more time with the couple and really seeing how they first met, how they created this bond together, and how they fell in love with each other, and how they're still very passionate with one another despite all the trauma and stress that they've gone through and with all the cases that they handled. And I really like that they took that approach and having a little more time with them in that regard, because having seen the first two films and seeing what they've gone through as a couple dealing with all the cases that they're handling, it was a nice break to kind of spend time with them to really see what they're going through personally, and the effect that it has on their health, among other things as well too. So that was a nice piece of change. And the actor that plays the character of Arn, the man who's possessed in this film, who commits the murderous act, I thought he did a really good job with his performance in this film. He really did a good job in conveying the fear of all the experiences that he's going through with the hallucinations that he is seeing under the possession of the demon, and when he commits the murderous act, the confusion that he's going through, or not knowing what had just happened, and all the things that's being told to him of what he just committed. He's just in shock and surprised to hear of what had happened, because he has no recollection of it, from what I remember. And you also do get to see the relationship that he has with his girlfriend in this movie too, which I thought was a really nice touch as well. And seeing what the couple are going through this horrific experience of him being possessed by this demon, and sticking together throughout the whole process. I thought that was a very nice touch to their story right there. But that's really where my pause is going to end here, because I forgot to mention earlier that I will not be getting to any spoilers here, because the film hasn't come out just yet. It'll be coming out this Friday on June 4th. So this will be the segue that I'll be using to get into my negatives. The first negative for me has to do with the fact that James Wan is not directing this movie. I mentioned earlier that this movie was a lot better than I anticipated. I had a lot of fun with the film, and I think Michael Chavez did a really good job with directing this movie. But it's clearly obvious that James Wan is not directing this film. There's a certain flair that James Wan has that you see with the horror films that he directs. I think he's the best when it comes to mixing a lot of the action elements with the horror. And in the last 20 years, I think he's one of the best horror directors that we've gotten, and he's definitely one of the tops in my opinion. And then you could also see that he has a very good eye and directing action films too, with the Fast and the Furious movie, and of course Aquaman. When you watch those films, the action in that film for me is phenomenal. I really, really enjoyed them. And he definitely has those flavors into his horror films, at least in the last couple of years. So it was obvious that was missing in this movie. But again, this is not taking away anything from Michael Chavez. I think he does a really good job in directing the film, but that to me was an obvious and missing ingredient with this new film. The second negative for me has to do with the fact that this movie does have a lot of the same horror cliches we've all seen before, and I am not against it. I don't really necessarily mind them all that much, but a lot of times some films just do the same exact things we've all seen before, and I would like to see something done differently. Now, in this film, I will give them credit that they do a good job in changing it up a bit by providing some really powerful visuals that were very effective in this movie, but it still had a lot of the same cliches we've all seen before, which didn't really do anything for me. The next negative for me has to do with the fact that you don't really spend a lot of time with the actual case in itself. The very little that you do spend with that case in the film was actually one of the best parts of the movie, But then after that, it's mostly spent with Ed and Lorraine Warren trying to collect evidence to prove that Arn is in fact possessed by a demon, and they were trying to collect evidence. And then they discover what had caused all this in the first place, which I actually thought was one of the weakest part of the films, which I won't get into because that's part of that spoiler territory. And I wish they would go back and spend more time, at least with the court hearing, because I would have liked to have seen the back and forth that the court system and the defense attorney had with regards to the case in itself, with providing the evidence that shows that, hey, we've got something here to verify our claim, and having the court system analyze that evidence to verify its legitimacy and so on. I would like to see a little bit more of that and play out in the film. And there were a lot of things in the positive and also in the negatives that I did not get into because I did not want to get into any spoilers. So this will be the perfect segue for me to get into my rating. I had fun with the movie. Even though I had a lot of problems with the film, there's still a lot that I enjoyed about this movie that I walked away pretty content with what I saw. So for me personally, I would say this film is definitely a raise the glass. And those are my thoughts on the film. And the movie comes out this Friday. And once you've seen it, let me know what you guys think in the comment section down below. And if you haven't done so already, subscribe to our channel. And also make sure you share and like our videos. And while you're down there, hit that notification bell. And follow us on our social media accounts. We have a Facebook and Instagram page at New Release Wednesdays, and on Twitter at the NRW. And you can follow me on my social media accounts on Instagram, Rob_Medina0585, on Twitter, RobMedina0585, and on Facebook, simply just Rob the Movie Guy. And also check out my new show on the channel that just dropped called You're So Cool with Rob Medina, where I do talk with people in the industry, where we talk about anything and everything. And my first guest on the show is David Michael Latt, who is the co-founder of the Asylum Films, who are famous for producing the Sharknado movies alongside with the TV shows Z Nation and the wonderful Netflix original show Black Summer. And he was a blast to talk with. I'll be sure to have the iCard for you guys to click on there so you guys can check out the episode, because he really does provide some wonderful insight. And also by now, I believe my second episode with the wonderful actress and Ashley Nieni, who is famous for being in the Human Centipede 1 and 2, and also her new film that just dropped, Antidote, which I highly recommend you guys do check out. Check out that episode as well too. But thank you guys very much for joining me here today. I hope you guys enjoyed this review. And until next time, everybody, stay safe out there and cheers.